All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our quarterly roundtable if you're an existing community partner of United Way, and also an information session about our new RFP and funding process. So we're really excited about this because we haven't put out a new RFP for 3 years. And we're also really excited about this because this is the first RFP that United Way has put out that is a county-wide funding framework and process. So I know we have some new people and on this call who have not been through this process before. And then we have some folks on this call who have been doing this for quite some time. And this is not their first sort of experience of applying for funding from United Way. And so we want to, when we go through this sort of process, we want to make sure that we're leaving time for questions, and we'd encourage you to ask those questions because, you know, even though you might be like, it's a dumb question, somebody else probably has it. And so it's going to be really helpful probably to anyone who's viewing this recording or who's in this session, if you're willing to kind of be brave and ask those questions. But I want to start by having the United Way team introduce themselves, and then I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who's our community impact manager. We do have some other things, as you saw from the agenda, that are not related to the RFP that we felt were really probably some valuable things for you to know about as well. So I should have introduced myself from the start, but my name is Amy Roller, and I'm the executive director of the United Ways of Chautauqua County. We are not merged legally yet, still waiting for the New York State Attorney General, but you'll notice in the RFP that we used United Way of Chautauqua County because we're anticipating that will be happening relatively soon. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa for you to introduce yourself.
Good morning, Lisa Sunday. I am the director of finance.
And Lisa, just how long have you been with United Way?
Both United Ways since 2008. It's been a while. South County since 2022.
Yeah, awesome. Dan, why don't you go next?
Hi everybody, Dan Syracuse. I have been at United Way for what, 7, 8 months, something like that. Can't remember exactly how long. I'm the community relations coordinator up in the North County.
Thank you, Katie.
Hey everyone, my name is Katie Castro and I am the Director of Advancement at United Way. I have been part of the team for about the same time that Dan has, about 7 months now, and really excited to go through this first allocations process with you.
And Eric, you're going to go last, and then you're going to kind of continue on our way, and I'm going to share my screen with the agenda and PowerPoint for today.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Ronaldo. I'm the Community Impact Manager for United Way, and I've been with the company just over a year. As of 8 days ago was my 1-year anniversary. Cool. So I believe Amy's going to get us on the next page. And we'll do some quick introductions, everyone's favorite, I know. But when we do this, I'll just kind of call on you. Share with me this information, share with the group this information, name, organization, your role, and then the discussion prompt. What's one way that your organization is celebrating the holidays with staff and or clients this season? So originally we were going to do some questions afterwards on 3x5 cards, but since we are remote, if you have questions like Amy said, you can pipe up and ask them as we go. Or if you're not quite comfortable with that, you can put your question in the chat and we will answer those either throughout the presentation or we'll tackle it at the end. All right, so let's go around here. Hold on, I gotta get my screen layout a little better so I can see you all.
And I would add, Eric, if your video is off when you introduce yourself, could you please turn your video on at least for that introduction so we can just see your face and make that connection? That would be great.
Cool, sounds good. All right, so we'll just start here in no particular order. Melanie, would you lead us off?
Happy to. Good morning. Oh, there's 2 Melanies.
That's okay.
All
Sorry,
you.
Melanie.
You're good.
That doesn't happen very often in meetings, but good morning, everyone. I'm Melanie Bloodworth from Girl Scouts of Western New York. I am the VP of our Girl Experience team. And our organization, we had a holiday party this past Monday, and we're a regional organization across 9 counties. So it's really a great time for us all to be in person. So we had that on Monday, and it was lovely. And can I turn it over to the other Melanie?
Please do.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if there is another Melanie that is typically in these meetings, but good morning. I'm Melanie Witkowski. I'm the executive director at Prevention Works. We have 2 locations, one in Dunkirk and one in Faulkner. And our organization is having an all staff / holiday luncheon next Thursday at our new Faulkner location. And we're also doing something where we're giving back to the community. So we're doing a little bit of a drive, a food drive, a prevention giving drive. So all staff are going to be providing some food to give back to the community.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up is Jeannie Galloway.
Hi, I am Jeannie Galloway from the Boys and Girls Club of Northern Chautauqua County in Dunkirk. I am the executive director, and our organization is doing a holiday party with staff and kids on December 18th. It's always a really fun event. We have actually some of you have sponsored some of our kids. They get gifts and we do food and crafts, and it's just a really, really fun time. And then the board and myself get the staff their own gifts, and we make it a whole just nice little event.
Awesome. That sounds great. All right, next up we have Jennifer. I believe you're the only Jennifer here.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Potter. I'm from Prevention Works, and I'm the Complete Youth Prevention Education Project Coordinator. And again, like Melanie Witkowski said earlier, we are having a holiday party next Thursday at Prevention Works to celebrate with staff. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, next up is Julie.
Good morning. I'm Julie LeGros, the Executive Director at Literacy Volunteers of Chautauqua County. And we just had a little potluck. Staff and volunteers got together and everybody brought their favorite food. And so we had a nice time.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie. All right, next up, Jared.
Hello, my name is Jared Bouchong. I am with Breathe Life of Western New York, based out of Brockton. My role with Breathe Life is I'm the community outreach director, so I engage community and the community of Brockton, Portland in different creative ways, mostly with teenagers and the young adults in the area. And the staff of Breathe Life are doing a Christmas party actually after Christmas, but I'm doing a Christmas party with the volunteers that help run our youth program. That's on the 21st. So
Sounds great, Jared. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, next up, Nick.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick. I am the food access manager for the Jamestown Public Market, which is operated by St. Luke's Episcopal Church. We are doing a few different things. We had our volunteer recognition in early December as a way just to celebrate all the work that they helped us accomplish this year. We have our very first winter farmers market, which is kind of holiday themed. So local farmers will have live Christmas trees and wreaths and poinsettias along with local food. And then our organization, because it is a church, actually celebrates our holiday party after the new year, because Christmas time is very, very busy for churches. So yeah, we've had a lot of celebrating this month.
Sounds like it. Thank you, Nick. That's great that you're doing a winter farmers market. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, next up, Stuart.
There you go. Good morning. My name is Stuart Thompson. I am the president and co-founder of Breathe Life of Western New York. We will, as Jared said, we will be doing our Christmas gathering after, because things are very, very busy at this time of year. I'm also the pastor of the church that's right behind the St. Stephen's. If you've ever been in Brockton, the Green Arches, Breathe Life owns the building that's right there on the left. or right, depending on which way I guess you're coming. But it used to be, it's the St. Stephen's Cafe now. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate that info. All right, next up, Jill.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Jill Moe. I'm with Girl Scouts of Western New York. I am the manager of United Way Relations. I also attended the very lovely Christmas party that Melanie #1 did. And if the weather cooperates, I'm supposed to have a Christmas party potluck with my Girl Scout troop on Sunday. So fingers crossed for that.
Yes, fingers crossed. That sounds like fun, Jill. All right, next up, we have Amanda.
Good morning. My name is Amanda Straight. I'm the Deputy Director of Housing at Chautauqua Opportunities. I wanted to say thank you for making this virtual because I cannot see across the street right now. I'm sitting in my kitchen and I cannot see anything. For Chautauqua Opportunities, we have a Santa event at the Safe House for the youth on December 18th. We do potlucks, luncheons. I believe that's next Thursday. And we're having a winter clothing drive. At each of our locations, we have tables and clotheslines with warm winter weather gear.
Awesome, thanks. Amanda, are you guys taking donations for those drives?
I'd have to look into that. We had a bunch of donations already, socks and hats and big hoodies and heavy t-shirts. And I know that they're looking for new items, but I'll check and let you know.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next up is Jamie.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jamie Swanson from the Salvation Army. I'm the finance manager here. We do a few things at Christmas, but we do holiday meals, turkey or ham dinner. We do the angel tree tags, the toys for children. And then we're doing a staff Christmas party on, well, tomorrow, the 13th. Yeah, and thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Jamie.
Yep.
All right, next up is Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Stevens from YWCA Westfield. And we are doing a breakfast on Tuesday at, I think it's called Music for Your Mouth in Mayville. That's it.
Awesome, thank you, Stephanie. That's a great restaurant too, if you haven't been over there. Okay, next up we got John.
Hi, my name is John Crawford. I'm the president of Junior Achievement of Western New York. And we had our board meeting / holiday reception last night in Buffalo. That was great. And then our staff team's going out for lunch on the 19th. So we're looking forward to that. Thanks.
Great, thanks, John. Okay, next up we have Misty.
Good morning, everybody. Misty Allen with Allegheny Highlands Council, Boy Scouts. We're supposed to have our staff meeting tonight. We had to cancel because it would have been in Casadega. We have a lot of people coming from North County, so we err on the side of caution. Be, prepared. As far as our units, we're out doing those individual parties with our different units, and my Scout Reach kids will be having their parties next week.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Misty. Okay, next up is Beth.
Good morning, everyone. I am also echoing the can't see across the road, can't even see the backyard right now. Hated to cancel, but I am the executive director of Campus and Community Children's Center. We have 2 different sites, one in Fredonia and one in Dunkirk. Our organization is celebrating with families in a couple of different ways. Monday, we will have a winter festival, which is sort of like a Polar Express theme, where families will get a ticket and then go to each classroom. They're learning about curriculum and how they can implement the curriculum at home as well as what we're doing in the classroom. We're also having a fun family cookie decorating, and the kids will make smoothies for their parents, which is always fun and interesting to see how much of it actually stays in the blender if they remember to put the top on it. But lots of great fun, and we are celebrating our 50th anniversary year this year. So lots of different things in 2025 as well.
Great, congrats on 50 years. That's amazing. All right, next up, we've got, hold on, the order jumbled on me. Bridget, you're up.
Good morning. This is Bridget Micah. I am the Executive Director of Chautauqua County Rural Ministry in Dunkirk. For the holidays, we have several things. For our staff and volunteers, we will be having a New Year's party, just because before Christmas is really a crazy time around here. We just finished up our applications for our gifts and for our food boxes, but the Friendly Kitchen will also be serving a really nice Christmas meal as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bridget. All right, next up we have Katie. Katie C.
Hi, I'm Katie Cassens from Junior Achievement of Western New York. I'm the development specialist, so I work with a lot of grants, foundations. I was hoping John would go right before me so I could just say the same thing he did. But we had a holiday party last night with the board and a staff luncheon next week, so it'll be fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. All right, next up is Stacy. Stacy, you there? Oh, she's having computer issues. All right. Okay, so Stacy, if you get that figured out, let us know. You can jump in whenever and do your introduction, okay? All right. I believe that's it. I think we hit everybody. I'm just double checking the names here, making sure I didn't miss somebody. If I did miss somebody, which I don't think I did, just pipe up. All right, Amy, I believe I'm going to turn it over to you.
And thank you, Eric. And thank you, everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Katie for some just announcements, just general announcements that might be of interest to either you or someone from your team in the future. So.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Amy. And thank you to all of you for sharing a little bit about yourself and some of the stuff that you have going on this holiday. It's fun to get a snapshot of what's happening at each organization. We want to take just a moment to kind of update you briefly on where we are with our campaign. So as most of you are aware, we kicked off our campaign in September. We usually culminate at the end of January. This year, we set a rather ambitious goal of $1.8 million. It's $200,000 more than we have ever raised before. However, as all of you are aware, the need is great in our community, and so we wanted to take a swing at it. Very excitingly, we can share now that we are at 62% of our goal, which is ahead of where we typically are percentage-wise at this point in the year. So we're pretty excited about that and want to say a giant thank you to each of you who have run workplace campaigns at your organizations. We have received back packets from many of you. And we know that this is a busy time of year for you, the fall. So many of you are school-based that have programming kicking off in the fall, and yet you found time to partner with us in this really substantial way. And so just wanted to kind of pause and say thank you for your support of our campaign. It means so much to us. Melanie Witkoski, I wanted to give you a chance to share anything, if there's anything that you wanted to say as one of our cabinet members for our campaign. Anything you would like to pipe in with?
I would just like to say that I think you by the merge, I think it's really been more visible in Chautauqua County, especially in the northern county. I don't think it was as visible before. So I will say that I think people are more or less talking a little bit more about it than we've seen before, whether it's the signs and the work that you guys are doing. I pay attention to your guys' social media, and I feel like you've done a wonderful job just getting into businesses that never had participated in the campaign before. So just kudos to all of you and the work that you guys are doing. I know we all appreciate it, especially in the North County, that is sometimes we feel like the forgotten child.
Well, and I'll say is a shout out to our friends at Breathe Life of Western New York. We do know Brockton because we did a campaign at Jamestown Plastics there a couple of weeks ago for the first time. They had never run an employee campaign before. So we haven't gotten the results of that back yet, but it was very well received. And we look forward to some future partnerships with Jamestown Plastics. So,
Well, that's great.
We know the arches. We know the arches of Brockton.
Good.
Great. Okay, well then let me share the next announcement with you. I'm gonna see if I can share my screen here real quickly. Okay, so many of you are aware that the United Way is one of the partners of the Capacity Lab, which is a county-wide nonprofit capacity building engine, if you will. And what we've been doing over the last, let's see, probably year and a half, is that we have been hosting mini conferences twice a year that are topically oriented around something specific that we've heard from our nonprofit partners is a need. So we have our next one coming up and would love for you to save the date for that. It is going to be January 30th. It is the topic for this one is Back Office Boost. So in June, we talked about strategic planning. The January before that, about a year ago, we talked about shared services. We think going into the new year that many of you may have on your mind, and you've shared this with us, some of the pain points of the back end systems in your organizations and how to bring those further into missional alignment for the new year. So that is the topic for this conference. There's going to be a keynote on organizational culture. There's breakouts on HR, financial management, systems like CRMs, and on team management. So this is going to be really high value packed. We're even putting together a panel around AI and its use in nonprofits. We would love for you to consider attending this event and maybe with some of your staff members or your team members as well. Here's my one word of caution to you. Next week, tickets are going to go live for this. You will be on the receiving end of the email as soon as those are live. We only have 80 spots for this. So we are going to be at the Resource Center here in Jamestown for this one. Typically, our January mini conference is in Southern Chautauqua and our June mini conference is in Northern Chautauqua. So we'll be in Jamestown for this one. And because of space, we really can't do more than 80 participants. So if you'd like to come to this mini conference, I'd encourage you to register soon, to register in December probably, so that you can reserve some space for you and your team to soak up all of the great information that is going to be shared there. I'm going to share, stop this. Go
Can I
ahead,
add
Amy.
to the chat
Yeah.
website of the Capacity Lab and the email address? If you're not getting those email newsletters, you can sign up for that. And they often have funding opportunities that come from regional funders and other resources that are available through the Capacity Lab. So if you're not kind of like connected in, either through the website or that email address, you can get connected to the Capacity Lab.
Yes, thanks, Amy. I appreciate that. One more quick announcement. Many of you have heard of Jamestown Young Professionals. I think that there's been word out there, whether it's newspaper or social media, the word on the street about Jamestown Young Professionals has been circulating quite a bit lately. But you may not have known that Jamestown Young Professionals is actually supported by United Way. So we are the backbone agency to Jamestown Young Professionals because we are so committed and care so deeply about empowering and mobilizing the next generation of leaders in our community and making sure that they have a strong foundation in giving back to our community. And so If you don't know anything about Jamestown Young Professionals, we'd really like for you to learn a few things. And one of the easiest ways that you can do that is by following our Facebook page. I'm going to share it real quick. This is what it looks like. Search Jamestown Young Professionals. We are currently the only young professional network in all of Chautauqua County, and our intent is to serve all of Chautauqua County despite the name Jamestown Young Professionals. There was previously a Northern Chautauqua Young Professionals. However, they have decided to expand to all ages and are now Chautauqua Professional Group. So we are the only young professional group that is serving intentionally individuals between the ages of 20 and 40 years old. If that's not you, if you're outside of that age bracket, there's a couple of ways that you can still support Jamestown Young Professionals. The first is get your young staff members that fall within that age bracket to some of our events. So we have these kind of 3 core pillars. All of our events rotate in and out of these pillars. The first is connect. So we are intentionally connecting young professionals across the county. Some of our events are purely about connection. The second is develop. So some of our events are learning based that are all about self and professional improvement. And then the third is impact. So we are intentionally designing and curating events that are service oriented so that young professionals in our community have the opportunity to learn more about service in our community by volunteering together. If you'd like any more information about Jamestown Young Professionals, follow the Facebook page or reach out to me and I'd be happy to share more info.
Thank you, Katie. And I put the link to the Facebook page in the chat as well if you want easy access to it. So one more quick announcement, and that is around VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. And some of you, this is going to be, you know this already, but I want to say 2 things about VITA. You likely have clients and or employees that really qualify to have their taxes done for free through our volunteers. And when the tax season begins at the end of January, we'll have some flyers and information about that. The way they get one of those tax appointments, and we have sites in Dunkirk, we have sites in Jamestown, we have sites really all over Chautauqua County and some of the smaller rural regions. The way they get that appointment is they call 211, and that's how they get an appointment. And Katie, would you stop sharing your screen? And I'm going to share my screen. But there's something that we offer to our community partners that is a little bit different, and it may not be relevant to all of you, but we also have in the past done taxes at nonprofits specifically for their employees. So these are tax appointments that are not open to the public. They're for your employees only. There's a couple of requirements. If you only have a couple of employees, then we're not going to probably come do taxes for them. But if you have like a larger group of employees and you think it might be really convenient for them to have their taxes done while at work, and you're willing to give them the time, the hour they'll need to sit down with our tax preparer, this might be something for you. We're going to send this to you later, this flyer, but this is just information about what we would need if you were to have your employees served by our VITA volunteers. We would need like a room to be able to do those taxes. We would need like access to Wi-Fi, and then we would need you to kind of tell them all of the different documents that they would need to bring with them. So I will send this to everybody who is on this call. But it really is a great way and very convenient, I think, for employees to get their taxes done. And it also really helps us because we're always looking to expand the taxes that we do for Chautauqua County. Last year, we did taxes for more than 1,300 households and brought back $1.9 million in refunds to working families. And the eligibility of household income is pretty high. It's around $70,000 for a household. So we'll send this information, but we thought this was a great way to just get that information out to you while we were on this call. Any questions about any of the announcements we've made about VITA or any of these other things? And I would encourage you to use the chat function or like raise your hand as we're going along, because we're going to move into the next part of our agenda. But as you have questions, please do like use that chat function and ask them, and we will try and kind of respond to them as they come. So Melanie, you have a question. Melanie, I'm sorry, Melanie from Prevention Works. Melanie number 2,
Actually,
right?
not a question, but I didn't know if you wanted to mention the social media campaign that was put out by Kelly Borello. It's super easy. If you haven't seen it on Facebook, share it on your personal social media. And also, if you're able to donate even like $10, you'll see the increase of the rate as people are donating. So highly recommend that if you haven't already done that.
Thank you, Melanie. Appreciate that. So, all right. Everybody can see my screen again, right? Okay. So now we're going to dive into the request for proposal, the RFP, which is really what we call our kind of application guide to receiving funding from United Way. I sent that as an attachment in the hopes that you could have it in kind of in front of you or on your screen or be looking at it, because what we're going to do today is we're not going to literally like read this to you or walk you through it, because we know that you can read it. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of like stop at certain points where we want you to maybe like we can go a little bit deeper into some of the logistics of this, or we can provide a rationale to you, or we can just provide like a space for you to ask questions. So we're hoping that you've at least taken a look at this before you get to this meeting, because we want to maximize the use of your time. Again, kind of acknowledging that we have agencies here that have been receiving United Way funding for years, and then we have people who are new, and we have individuals who maybe are new to the process, but their agency has been receiving funding, and we do have some changes as well to the process. So that's kind of the hope for today. Some quick background, which you read about in the introduction, but I do think it's significant that since 2014, so 10 years ago, the United Way of Southern Chautauqua County started funding in what we call kind of like an outcome based approach to funding. So what that means is we weren't just funding agencies, we were funding programs. And we were asking programs to sort of very specifically locate themselves in one strategic area and measure sort of in similar ways. And what that did for us is it allowed us to sort of see the collective impact of United Way programs. So we could say not just this, like one agency was feeding this many people, but collectively United Way agencies were feeding or supporting this many people. And so that was the sort of the rationale. United Way of Northern Chautauqua County did not have that specific of a sort of funding framework and approach. So if you'd been receiving funding from United Way of Northern Chautauqua County, this might feel a little bit different to you in our approach. And the other thing that I think that's really important is this RFP that you see in front of you. We did conduct an equity audit. We used a third-party consultant to look at our process to make sure that we were looking at not just who we fund, but how the process works with an equity lens. And we also incorporated feedback from agencies themselves, not only during a couple of roundtables that we had, but in our site visits last year. We tried to get some feedback on the process and also the needs and gaps in Chautauqua County. I think that's really important, just to note. There was one other thing I was just going to say. It was in my mind and it left it for a second. Oh, one thing that I think is also really important, and Erica's going to talk about our allocations volunteers and like later on, but gosh, 3 years ago, no, it was like 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we also started having as part of our volunteer base to determine allocations, nonprofits themselves who are receiving funding. So on each panel, we have a community partner, someone who has been receiving United Way funding. And that was very intentional because what we wanted was the nonprofits who are in the allocations process to kind of have a voice at the table and in the funding decisions. Now, those volunteers do not make funding decisions for their agency, and we put them on panels, in sort of areas that are unrelated to their area. But every single panel has at least one person, if not more, who themselves receive United Way funding. And that was very positively received, I would say, from those individuals who serve as those allocations volunteers. And part of that for us was an equity decision. All right. Program eligibility. If you're looking at your RFP, this is going to be page 4 and page 5. But what's critical to receiving United Way funding is, number one, you have to be able to locate yourself in one of 4 strategic impact areas: youth opportunity, health equity, community resiliency, and self-sufficiency. We're going to get into the details of that funding framework later. But you might sort of notice, if you've looked at who we funded in the past, they are health and human service agencies. We do not fund animal agencies, arts agencies, cultural, not because we do not, like, ourselves personally love all of those, but it just doesn't fit in our funding framework and in our funding strategy. In order to be eligible, you have to locate yourself in one of those. You have to be able to report data. Again, we're going to get into that, but if you aren't able to report that data that we'll need, you wouldn't be eligible. And then you also have to kind of be ready to take on both the responsibilities and the benefits of being a United Way community partner. And that's a word that we use very intentionally, community partner, because we really do see it as a partnership. United Way is very different than other foundations, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, we have to raise the money every year. We have to make the case to our community every year that this is a valuable investment for them, because the funds that we raise in this year directly basically fund allocations in the next year. And we also utilize our community partners in raising those funds. You all have very compelling stories to tell. You are doing important work in this community. That's part of why we run campaign presentations, is to provide some education to individuals and to employers and to government agencies about the work that's happening. And so for us, we do consider it to be a partnership. If you look on page, let's see, it's page 6 of the RFP, you're going to see benefits and responsibilities of funded programs. I won't read this through, but I would encourage you to really look through this. We did make a couple of changes to this. And so for those of you who've been community partners, I'll give you some examples of some of the changes that we've made. We do ask that you attend quarterly roundtables, and we think that's we try and make those really valuable uses of your time, by either the content or the networking that we try to do and the connections that we try to make at those roundtables. We also did something new this year. We asked you to follow us and like our Facebook pages. Now, this isn't just because we want you to we want to build our social media, but we often tag you all in what we do. And we can't tag you if you aren't someone that likes us. And we tag you because that actually brings, publicity to you, right? Or we might share one of your posts or share something that's going on. So if you like us, that makes it much easier for us to capitalize on the social media. So it sounds funny, but it is a requirement of being a funded community partner. Another one is you need to maintain an up-to-date 211 profile. If you don't know what 211 is, I'm not going to, somebody put a link in the chat. Eric put a link to Western New York 211 in the chat. It's easy to update your profile, but it's really important that the services you provide, the contact information is correct for 211, because people will call and ask for help, and it's only as good as the data that they have, which means you all need to be updating. So you can't even apply for funding unless you update that. And actually, we do check. That's something that we started doing. We check and make sure that your profile is updated. So we've had that in place for several years now. What is new this year is we're also going to ask you to update and maintain a profile in something called SEFA. That's the State Employee Federated Appeal Campaign. Lisa Sunday, who's our director of finance, oversees that for us. She's going to talk in more detail about how you do that, but that might be new to some of our Southern Chautauqua agencies. Northern Chautauqua agencies have been doing that for a long time, but it's a benefit to you because if you have an employee who works for SUNY Fredonia, but they live in Jamestown, and they might be like, gosh, I'd love to give to the Jamestown public market out of my paycheck, but when I go to log on to my account and make it, I don't see them in the list. So I can't do that. This is going to maybe open up for you all some donors and some donations that you didn't have before if you have an account in CEFA. And that's the entire state of New York. Every state employee, from SUNY Fredonia to the prison to somebody in New York City, every state employee can give, but they have to give through this CEFA portal. So that's going to be something that's maybe new for some of you, and we're going to walk you through that. And one of the things that you're going to see throughout this document is like we're constantly saying to you, if you need help, please reach out. If you need support, please reach out. We want you to be successful with our volunteers and with our process. And we want you to know that you have our support. And so Eric Ronaldo is going to be the person that you reach out to, whether it's, and he'll connect you to either one of our team that maybe knows more, like CEFA, but we want you to ask for help in making sure that like you're applying in the right area, you know, you're collecting data in the right way, you understand it. That is our goal. The other thing that is not new, but I will point out, because I know we have some folks here who have never received United Way funding in the past. We do have what's called a blackout period. And what that means is between September 1st and November 15th, we ask you to do no fundraising. And here's why. It takes a lot to raise $1.8 million. And when we're going to businesses, and that's kind of our primary model for fundraising, we're going to businesses and workplaces and asking them to make a corporate gift or have their employees make a gift. It's very difficult if they're getting a lot of different requests from 34 or more agencies. And so for that period, we ask you not to do a direct mail appeal or conduct fundraising activities. However, there have been situations where we have made exceptions to that. Sometimes it's because we take on a new community partner and they've been doing a fundraiser October 12th for, 100 years. We have a form that you fill out. You'll request it from Eric. And what we try and ask you to do, if we do allow fundraising activities during that time, is if anyone requires sponsorships where you're approaching businesses, that you get those sponsorships before September 1st. So I know that's difficult. And there have been agencies who have made the decision not to receive United Way funding because they don't feel that it's worth it, to not do fundraising. That's a choice and something that you're going to need to look at as you apply for United Way funding. And I spend a lot of time here because I don't want you to go through the work of applying for United Way funding if in the end you're not either eligible or you don't really think that you can take on some of those responsibilities of being funded by United Way. So, and then finally, I'll say two more things. There is a minimum request of $7,500. The reason we do that is we want our funding to be impactful in your organization. And if it's $1,000 or it's $2,500, it may not be worth your time to apply for funding, and it's probably not worth our time to go through the process. And so we want that funding to be impactful for your organization. So as you apply, whatever $7,500 is going to be helpful for you and your program, it should be a minimum of $7,500. And then we do a 2-year funding cycle. And so what that means is you're going to apply once in January, and you're not going to have to apply again for 2 years. You will have funding for 2 years. Whatever your award is, let's say you get 15,000, you will get 15,000 in each year. So that is one of the benefits of United Way funding, is I do think that we're one of the only funders, at least locally, regionally, that's not necessarily the case, but that funds in a 2-year cycle. But we will do a site visit in that second year, but it won't be for funding. It will just be kind of a check-in year where we get an update on your agencies and your programs. So I'm going to stop before I turn it over to Eric, and I want to sort of see if there's any questions that anyone has about eligibility, responsibilities, just any of the background information.
Amy, I have a question here in the chat.
Mhm.
It says, what about funding outside of Chautauqua County? We are funded from individuals and churches mostly.
So that would be a different thing. If you felt concern about that, you know, you weren't sure, you could fill out one of those supplemental fundraising requests. But if you are asking for funding outside of Chautauqua County, that would be, that would probably not be something that we would say you can't do during the blackout period. It's a good question. Misty, you have a question?
Yes, good morning, Amy. My question is, everybody knows the Boy Scouts sell popcorn. That's a national thing. Would I have to fill out that request form every year, being that it's a 2-year cycle with Eric, or do you know what I mean?
When are you selling popcorn?
We always start in September and we have it delivered by Veterans Day, which is November 11th.
I would say fill out the form, but you would likely not have to do it every year. But at least having sort of like a record that we know that's happening would be important.
I again, everybody knows they've been around, but I'm new. I want to make sure I'm as compliant as I can be, and that's why I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Eric, I think you're next.
Okay, great. All right, you're looking at key dates and deadlines. I won't go over all these. I'll only hit on the 2 that are starred here for us. The first one that's coming up next would be the application that is completed for the funding for this current cycle. So January 31st, applications must be submitted through Chautauqua Grants, which I'll talk about a couple slides ahead, so that they're into us on time so that we can have you part of our allocations process. Underneath that, there is another little item due, the interim data report. This is from last year's July 2024 through December 2024 period of reporting. So these are for folks who would have already received funding from us, are submitting these reports. Basically just progress reports on how things are going, who you've served, narrative reports of how things are going, etc.
And Eric, I'll just clarify on that. We aren't going to ask for any narrative in that report. It will simply be data that you'll be submitting if you're a currently funded community partner. No narrative, just data.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
In February, this is where we start our allocations process begins officially here. Those 3 days, February 25th through the 27th, those are orientation days for our allocations volunteers. And the reason why I point those out to agencies is that during this time, the volunteers, Amy and myself, are calling you guys to set up when your site visit will take place. So we need to be able to reach you via phone in that moment because we have to do a lot of schedule juggling, a lot of availability juggling. And if we can't handle it right then and there, it's pretty impossible to do it through email. So we set aside those 3 days because we really need to have you guys available sometime during that time to field a phone call from myself or Amy so we can get you on the calendar for your site visit.
And in early January, Eric's going to send you all an email with a Google form. And that Google form will be like you telling us kind of like some blackout dates for you during the whole allocations process where you know you're not going to be available for a site visit. And also at some point you'll get an email with your specific window of time. So you don't have to be available all 3 days. You'll get an email once we have sorted through which panels are reviewing which applications. we're going to give you a half an hour time frame where we want you available. We don't know yet when that is, and we won't know until much later. But you will get like a half an hour window. So during the 25th and the 26th and 27th, we'll also ask you to put times when you know you aren't available, so we don't call you and we don't organize it that way. Does that make sense? If you're new to this process, you might be like, what? I mean, but literally we have around a table all of our volunteers that will be reviewing applications, and we've already kind of figured out what their schedules are and what will work for everyone. And so when we call you, you know, we're basically saying, can you make this day? And that's why you sending us those blackout times are really important, because we don't want to pick a day that you're not available. So look for that email in early January from Eric, and be thinking ahead of your calendars between, you know, you see that the dates are March 3rd to May 2nd, just be thinking of when you know. And by the way, we won't be scheduling any site visits during any of the school breaks. So just note that you don't even have to list it as a blackout date, because our volunteers usually aren't available during those times because people are on vacation. So questions? Good. Okay. Awesome. All right, we're going to talk. Oh, no, sorry. That's you, Eric.
Yep, no worries. Okay, so good transition from our allocations process into kind of how that works. So the volunteers that we recruit to be part of the allocation process are gathered from all over Chautauqua County in its entirety. We're talking public, private, nonprofit sectors are all invited to come be part of this. And the greater variety and the greater difference we have in individuals to be on these panels, the better it is. These are folks who are business owners or workers or teachers or nonprofit employees. These folks are making critical decisions on the funding process. So it's helpful to have as diverse a panel as possible to go out on these site visits. These folks are well prepared and informed. I put together binders for each individual volunteer that contains more or less information on each agency's program that they will be visiting during their time, which includes budgets, data, interim reports that you guys submit. Those are all part of those informational packets that they receive so that they can make educated decisions. And then when they come to you, they are prepared with information, with your background, and if questions if they have any. Okay, so once we get there, once we get to your location, what can you expect from a site visit? They're about 45 minutes long. We try to be very strict with that because we want to respect everyone's time. Agency employees, and our allocations volunteers want to respect their time that they're taking to do this. So 45 minutes is where we sort of estimate that'll take. So we plan for that. Agencies will give a brief introduction where they can introduce themselves. They talk about the program or programs that United Way funds. And then following that, we open up the floor for questions from the allocations volunteers. And believe it or not, that 45 minutes flies by very quickly. So introductions and questions usually wraps us up pretty quickly. And then after that, when site visits are concluded, there's a whole other process that will take place, especially since this is a funding year. This will be my very first funding year that I'll handle with allocations. Last year, when we did this, it was our funding extension, and we didn't have to make funding decisions. So to talk more about that, I'm going to ask Amy to jump in and talk about scorecard, how that works, how funding decisions are made, and how funds are distributed.
Thanks, Eric. Sorry, everybody. I stopped my video because I thought it might help the bandwidth. I think we're having a little bit of bandwidth issue. So Eric, you might do that for a minute. So so the allocations volunteers, after they do the site visit, they have one final meeting. And that's when we look at all of the different agencies that they've evaluated and their programs, and they decide which ones are going to be funded and at what level. I'm going to show the scorecard later, and again, it's right in that RFP. You can look at exactly what the criteria are. But it's one tool of many that we use. So like your score is not directly tied to like your funding, because we're going to take that scorecard, we're going to take our site visit, we're going to look at needs, and then we all come to a consensus. So that scorecard, all the volunteers come to a consensus on it, and we decide collectively what the score is going to be. And we do the same thing with the funding decisions. And for those of you who have served on those allocations panels, I will tell you, they're really hard decisions to make. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of conversation. And the problem is we usually get more requests in funding than money we have to allocate. And so last year, or the last time we did a funding cycle in Southern Chautauqua County, we had about $150,000 more in requests than what we had allocated. I fully expect that to be the case again. And so just know that there's a lot of wrestling and conversation that happens in these meetings. And I'll go over the finer details of the scorecard a little bit later in this. But we'll take a minute and we're going to pause and see if there's any questions specifically about our allocations volunteers, site visits. And do feel free to use that chat. Just making sure nobody's raising their hand. All right. I'm gonna share a different part of my screen, and I apologize. My computer seems to be slow today. And I want to talk just briefly about the funding framework. And if we had been in person, your agenda would have had this funding framework on the back of it. Because it really is our roadmap to how we make decisions and how we evaluate success. So I'm actually going to pull up the RFP for a minute. In a very slow minute. All right. Has that appeared for you yet? Eventually? We got it? Okay, good. So I'm not going to go through the data, but we provide this data before we get to the funding framework, and we have links to this data, where we got it, because we wanted you to have community level data in understanding like why these were priorities for us. And then we also want you to be able to access that as well. If you want to look for yourself, there's some really, really great data in each of these sections from New York State education, from sorry, scrolling very slowly today. ALICE data, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with ALICE, that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed, what we've traditionally referred to as the working poor. That is a demographic that we're trying to focus a bit more on, because they are often underserved in our community because they're working and sometimes don't have access to supports and services. There's some really great data from something called the Community Resiliency Estimates. I recommend you click on that link. Really interesting data there. But everything is grounded in this community level data. And so some of the verbiage in these sections really are just cluing you in, your boards in, others that might be involved in this process, to some of the background as to why this funding framework. So this is the funding framework. I told Eric when he started, I said, print this out and put it on your bulletin board, because like this is literally like everything we do when it comes to community impact. Now, for those of you who have been funded for a while, you're going to notice this is different. We have made some changes. So one of the key changes that we've made is to our strategic impact areas. They are now youth opportunity, health equity, community resiliency, and self-sufficiency. What I will tell all of you is that what hasn't changed is any of the outcomes. So all of those outcomes that were in our previous framework still exist, but we have sometimes categorized them differently and maybe slightly tweaked some language to truly update. I think, 10 years, I mean, it's been great that we've been using that same framework for 10 years, but the world has also changed. The world has changed because of the pandemic. Our county has changed because of changing needs. And we felt like it was time for some updates to language and how we frame things. So when you are applying for funding, you will have to locate yourself in one of these 4 strategic impact areas. And then you're going to have to kind of locate yourself in one of the outcomes. So, these are the outcomes that we are attempting to achieve as a community. I hope all of you, I mean, again, please read this through, but like children entering school ready to learn, youth are provided with the knowledge, skills, and support necessary to reach their potential. Families and individuals are engaged and empowered to support their children's success. That's youth opportunity. We think collectively, this is what our community needs. I don't want to read all of these because you can read them, but I want to talk about community resiliency. That might be kind of a new frame for like some of the outcomes in here, but we want to address immediate needs today to strengthen community and prepare for tomorrow. So this is where basic and emergency needs are. This is where things around housing and transportation, overcoming barriers. This is disaster prevention and education is here, because really, truly having a resilient community happens when these things are happening. Because if we can't do that, if you think about an individual, if an individual is only thinking about basic and emergency needs, it's impossible for them to be resilient for whatever comes. That's true as a community as well. And then if you look at self-sufficiency, that's where many of our outcomes around workforce development, people being employed, financial literacy, what we used to call ready workforce, we kind of took ready workforce and we really put it under self-sufficiency. So for those of you who've been, in this space for a while, it's going to look familiar, but there are some changes to how we've sort of overall framed it. And then the other thing that's really important in this funding framework is the indicators. So the indicators are how we know whether we've achieved that outcome. And it's essentially what you're measuring. Somebody that, has been a mentor to me often said, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And so, that data collection is really important. And as you look at these indicators, you're going to have to tell us what you will be measuring. So you need to look and you need to sort of see, can I measure this? Do I have the tools in place to measure this? Do I have the systems in place to measure this? Can I provide to United Way, this is what your reports will be. It'll be narrative, but it will also be you providing data to us. And you might be measuring more than one thing. You might also be measuring more than one outcome. That is okay. It probably speaks to the quality of your program if that's true, and if you might even have more than one outcome that your program is achieving. And you're going to have an option when you apply to tell us if there are secondary outcomes you're looking to do. But again, as you look at this and really look this through, you need to ask yourself, can I actually measure what they're asking? If you think you can measure it, but maybe you're like, hi, I'm not sure if I need some help in this. Maybe I want somebody to kind of come in and assess whether or not I have a good system, or they can help me set up a better system. You please reach out to Eric. We are more than happy to come in and help you assess whether or not you can measure it, and then I'll help you set up a system that will allow you to measure it. We want you to be successful because our community is successful when we have nonprofits that are serving their clients and helping them to thrive. So that's really important to us. I'm going to stop. What questions do you have on this funding framework? That's good. I'm glad to hear it. We must be doing a good job if that's the case. So, all right, let's see. I think, Eric, you're up next, so I'm going to share my screen again. Eric, you're there? Okay.
I am here. Okay, thanks, Amy. So let's say you decide to apply. You will apply through Chautauqua Grants, which we'll talk more about a couple slides ahead. But Amy and I really wanted to give you a preview of the types of questions that you'd be answering, just so you can sort of make a educated decision going into this and of what to expect. So this first set of questions is relatively straightforward. It's basic information, making sure that you have updated 211, you are all set and signed up with CIFA. And then it goes into just some basic organization and program snapshot questions. Nothing too major here, just sort of giving us some basic info on what your agency's program is focused on. And that's where you would, this is where you would pick from the list of strategic impact areas, and then choosing your outcomes, and then choosing your indicators. So once you go into this application, you'll see it's a very intuitive way of choosing your impact areas, outcomes, and indicators. We have it set up this year so that when you select one answer, it gives you a new set of questions based on that first answer. So took a lot of fiddling with Chautauqua Grants, so we got it set up. I think it looks and runs great. Okay, after that, we go into application questions. So these are, aside from the data, these questions are extremely impactful for your agency's program, because these narrative questions allow you to tell stories that data alone cannot tell. So these are testimonials from either program participants, or they are from your agency employees. And these are stories, narrative situations of things that you have accomplished in this past year that you want to tell other people about. And these narrative stories often make their way into the reports that I reproduce that talk about how much impact you've had. Because it really, you can look at a number and it looks great, but then if you have a story next to it that says, you know, something about how their life has changed, it really goes a long way to proving that, like, yes, those numbers look good, and here's a story to back it up. So these really help tell much more of your program's story.
Can I add to that? I want to talk about budget narrative for a second, because I think this throws people.
Please do.
You will have to upload a budget separately, but the budget narrative, the best way I can describe this is tell me the story of how, what your budget does. Like, if you have a really good budget narrative, that literally can be your grant application, right? Like, because you're saying, like, we do this, it tells the story of your program. These are expensive. We have phenomenal staff. You know, like, give us an idea of how you arrived at those numbers. So we do want to see a budget with numbers in it, but we also want to know how you arrived at those numbers, and really, like, what your budget is doing, right? And so this sometimes confuses people a little bit, because they're like, budget narrative, what is that? Or maybe you're unfamiliar with that terminology. But essentially, if you can say, like, gosh, what story does my budget tell? Tell the story of your budget in the budget narrative, right? Sometimes it's helpful if you, like, you know, if you have a budget line item of, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a great example, like supplies. Well, that doesn't tell us much. And so maybe you might in your budget narrative say, you know, well, we're doing crafts for kids, and so we buy supplies for them, and we also, like, make sure our volunteers have this. It's like, what kind of supplies and what's it doing for your program, right? That sort of thing. And again, if you have questions about this and you're like, man, Amy talked about that, but I still don't understand what she said, or what the heck that means, please reach out and we can work with you. We can give you examples from budget narratives that were really, really good, right? And so that might be helpful to you as well. So please reach out if you might want some examples of some really good budget narratives. Questions?
Okay. On this page, You can see a few other narrative type questions. However, these ones are a bit different. So the one up top here is about data. So data is critical to communication to us and the public about the effect and the reach that your program has. So first one is basically, how does your agency collect data? Like, what are the things you do to do it? What are your strategies? What tools do you use? And how is that data used? So you go back and look and you evaluate how things have been going. How do you use that data to make decisions going forward? And those data is critical in driving improvement in communicating your program's effectiveness. So below that, you have a few more narrative questions. One of them is on equity. One is on the challenges you face. And that one is all, they're all equally important, but the anticipated challenges one really communicates to us, what are some things that you're struggling with right now? What are some things coming up that you know are going to be a barrier, and how can we help, or how can other agencies help through collaboration? And below that, additional support, which is just basically us asking you, hey, what else can we do to help support you? We have a team here that's ready to help serve our county-wide agencies to help them be successful. And we're all here to help support you. So that's a good question that comes back to us, so we can look at it and say, oh, you know what, we could be doing more to help, and this is where.
And if you don't know what these terms mean, we do have a whole section on the back of this of key terms. And so we don't want to assume anything about, sometimes we in the nonprofit world, we throw around, things like equitable engagement or evaluation or those sorts of things. And so we tried to put the key terms, even allocations, right? It's a term we use a lot at United Way. We tried to put key terms in the back, and then resources as well. So I hope you do look at that, and frequently asked questions. And we are going to be taking your questions and adding, like, those frequently asked questions will be kind of a living document that will end up on our website. Because likely if you have a question, and it's not already in the frequently asked questions, somebody else does too.
Okay, thank you. All right. If you have never ever been to Chautauqua Grants before, this is what the first page you see would look like. It's straightforward. You click on the create new account, and then it drops you into the next page where you basically are registering your nonprofit on Chautauqua Grants. Once that's created, you can then go in and apply for series of grants and sources of funding through there, which is great. I will say, Chautauqua Grants does require some practice. If you've never been on it, you're going to need to get into it, register, look around. And if you ever had questions, call me. I've been on there quite a bit. And so I feel like I've gotten a much better grasp on it than when I started, and I'm able to help. And I have helped some folks in the past navigate through Chautauqua Grants because it can be a little cumbersome to get through. But once you get it, it's easy. And it's a great way to request and ask for money.
And Eric, I dropped into the chat the Chautauqua Grants website, because this is, again, if you're new to this, this is where you can find local funders of all kinds. And even if they don't ask you to apply on Chautauqua Grants, it gives you information about what their application process is, what their deadlines are. So really, if you're an agency looking for funding, you should be visiting this no matter what. And it also gives other funding as well. And so there's some information about some regional funding and that sort of thing as well. So please, if you've never visited, just even take a look. Our application is not on there yet. It will not be live on Chautauqua Grants until the 18th. That's when you'll be able to actually go in and start the process. And then Eric, we do have a question. Are agencies required to create a new account, or can agencies use their current account? You would use your current account.
Yes, you don't have to create a new one. The one thing I will say is that you need to be listed like on your agency's profile as like I don't know what the term is, but you have to list it on there as like the primary contact, or at least a secondary, to be able to go in and access applications and do work. If you are not listed on there, maybe you're a new employee or someone has left who used to do it, and you must be added. I can do that for you. You just have to email me and say, hey, I need access to our agency's Chautauqua grants. I can help with that.
And that's important because if you do receive funding, and this would be true of any of the foundations and the funders that are on this, oftentimes you get reminders about like reports that need to be done. And so if you have an outdated contact, then you're not getting some of the reminders that would potentially be helpful to you.
Yeah, good point, Amy. Thank you. That is correct.
Questions about Chautauqua grants? All right, so when you are in Chautauqua grants, there are, we have a list in the RFP of supplemental uploads. If you've applied for funding before, you know, none of these will be unfamiliar to you. And that's, if you're in the RFP right now, that's on page 12. So those are things like your most recently audited financials, your 990, the most recent statement of financial position or balance sheet. Different agencies use different terminologies for that. Current P&L, and then your agency budget, right? So those are just things that tell us a little bit about your agency. But there are 3 things that once you get into Chautauqua grants, you will have to download, fill out, and then re-upload to the site. And these are the 3 things that you will have to download. So one is, and they're all in the RFP. One is what we call an Agency of Excellence checklist. Really what this comes from is, you know, there's sort of some core competencies that all nonprofits should have. And there's 7 of them, I think, 6 of them. Vision and organizational operations, leadership and talent, board governance, finance, resource development, and inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. There's a lot more questions we could ask in each of these areas, but it's sort of in some ways like the basics. Like, does your board do a performance review of the executive director, right? How often do you have board meetings? Do you have some kind of vision for your organization? This is self-reporting. It's mostly checking boxes. And part of it is, it's not, if the answer is no, or if you feel like the answer isn't very great, you're like, please do not let that be a barrier. Part of this is just around awareness. Like maybe you didn't know that was something that you should be doing, or your board didn't know, and you're a small agency that's just started out, or you just formed a 501c3. And part of it is just helping agencies know like what sort of makes like an excellent nonprofit, right? And it's about awareness. So this is just something that you will self-report, but it allows us to have a snapshot of your agency in a way that doesn't require us to ask like a ton of questions and like, you know, that sort of thing. So hopefully this is fairly easy for you to do. And if you've done this in the past, a lot of it will be the same, right? You know, but just different things like that. Program statistics. So that is really like the demographics of who you're serving. We understand that for some of you, you will have exact numbers, and for some of you, you're going to be estimating this because you haven't collected data like this before, or you don't collect this demographic data. You will need to kind of collect this demographic data for our reporting sake in terms of who you're serving. And so if you don't have a system for doing that, you may want to think through how it is that you'll be doing that. But it's in age, race and ethnicity, gender, and then socioeconomic. I know in the past, some of you have had some concerns about the socioeconomic population. You don't collect that. And so if that's true, you don't collect that, or there's barriers to you collecting it, there's a place for you to comment on that and sort of give us some explanation. But you can also sort of like generally have an estimate. You may not collect exact data, but if you are serving households in poverty, they're getting benefits, right? They're getting potentially like SNAP or TANF or HEAP, you know, those sorts of things. If you're serving households, they're employed. You know, that's kind of the difference between the two. Again, if you have questions about this specifically for your agency, or you want to have further conversation, you know, please let us know. And then finally, you will also be required to do a program budget. So you have an agency budget, which is your overall agency, but then the program that we're funding, we need a budget for. So this could be also new for some people. So we have agencies that have many programs, right? And we're not funding all those programs. We're funding maybe one or two. And by the way, you can't apply for more than one program. Like if you look at our list of currently funded agencies, you can see there are some agencies that there's a couple of programs that we're funding. And so we want to know what it costs. What does that program cost? And what's the revenue supporting that program? So again, if you have questions about this, there are a handful of agencies for whom their agency budget and their program budget might be the same thing, depending on what they do. And if you don't know if that's the case or you want to talk through that, please reach out. Questions about the supplemental uploads? I will say when you submit like your most recent or your current P&L, what we're really looking for, so for example, this is due January 31st. Do not give me January 2025's P&L because that gives me no information about your organization. Give me last year's full year P&L. It's not the audited one, we know that, but it's the most accurate snapshot of your agency's financials. 1 month will tell us nothing. And Eric will be emailing you and he'll be saying, this is what we need. We need not 1 month's financials, but your sort of like most recent, like year-to-date financials. So just, we've had that happen a little bit in the past. And again, if you have questions and you're not sure, then please reach out. And that will depend too on your fiscal year. Any questions?
There's a question in chat. Fiscal year to date or calendar?
What is your fiscal year, Jill? I don't remember with Girl Scouts.
We're October 1 to September 30th.
Yeah, then we probably just your year to date would be probably October, because likely we'll have your audited financials or some version of that from the previous fiscal year. And so I think October through January would be fine, or
Okay.
December.
Thank you.
All right. We mentioned the scorecard. I just wanted to bring it up briefly. You kind of know the role it plays. But the reason we have a scorecard is we've got 60 different volunteers from different backgrounds. We put them on panels. We need to make sure our volunteers are evaluating programs using the same criteria, right? So it's not just like, yeah, some rogue person that's like, this is super important to them, and that's how a funding decision gets made, right? So we want to have consistent criteria across all volunteers and all panels, which is why we use a scorecard. That also helps guide our conversation. So it's just not people talking about all kinds of different things about the program. When we have those funding decisions, we are looking at each of these criteria. Some of them we weight more highly than others. So if you see the gray shaded, those actually have more value to us when it comes to scoring. And it makes sense, right? Like one of the criteria is program description clearly defines what, how, when, where, and for whom. Well, that's important. We want to know that. But is that as important as the program is responsive, relevant, and effective in addressing community needs? No, it's not, right? One could just be like, you do a really good job of describing. The second is, wow, that is a really needed program in our community. And what if we don't fund it, what happens if it's not there? Because it's so critical to addressing community needs. And so I won't go through this, but you have this. And one of the things that we recommend is, in your site visit, you might consider, because you're going to be doing like a brief presentation, you might consider shaping your presentation according to this scorecard, right? So if you can, like in a site visit, sort of address some of these, that makes it really easy for our volunteers to, be able to know whether they can answer these questions or not. We've also tried to shape the application questions in such a way that they will help us see this. And then the site visit also really helps too. So if something wasn't clear in your application and we know it's a criteria on a scorecard, we're probably going to ask a question about it if we don't feel like it's been answered, right? But we want you to have, it's like teaching to the test. We want you to have the scorecard and know exactly the criteria that we're going to use to evaluate your programs. Questions about the scorecard? The other thing that's really helpful about the scorecard, and we've tried to use it pretty consistently, is if you've applied for funding before, we can look at last year's scorecard and it's kind of great, right? Like if you've improved, we can see that. And some of the panels will have reviewed your programs in the past if you've received United Way funding. So it's kind of like a nice way to sort of track progress. And what we will do with this scorecard is we're going to share it with you. So once all the funding decisions are made, you're going to get a visit from Eric, maybe myself, depending, like I won't be able to go to all of them. And we are literally going to share the scorecard with you, but the important part of the scorecard is actually not the score, it's the notes. So what we do is when our volunteers are discussing, they'll often say really great things about your program. We will capture that in the notes, right? So, because we want you to know things that you're doing well, things that you should be proud of, things that you should be really affirmed for. They might also have some suggestions for you for how you can improve, or a partner that you can collaborate that maybe you knew about, maybe you didn't. And those volunteers come from all walks of life. So they have a perspective that is possibly a perspective you've never considered, or they might have an idea or a connection that you may not have access to because they're coming from finance and government and manufacturing and education. Sometimes they're folks with lived experience, like in these areas. And so we can't like literally capture every comment that gets made, but we try and get like the most like important ones, or where there was a lot of consensus, or ones that we feel like are a really good idea. And so when Eric is bringing you the scorecard, it's not like, okay, here's the results, it's really more a way for us to have a conversation and to share what it is that those volunteers like heard and saw when they did a site visit and when they read your application. Does that make sense? Questions about the scorecard and how it's used? Okay. Okay. General questions over anything that we've gone over, or anything in the RFP that maybe like when you were reading, you were like, I still don't know, or that doesn't make sense. That's good. So we're gonna, we might even talk about this now, but like, so there's a QR code. And one of the things we're doing this year that's different is if you scan that QR code, it's going to go to a Google form and you can request assistance, and it can be from United Way staff, but we have a group of retired executive directors who have experience in applying for United Way funding, who have agreed to volunteer their time to help you. So if you want somebody to read your application, right? They're not going to write it for you. They will not do that. But if you want somebody to read your application, like maybe a pass through, if you prefer not to ask us, you're like, I'm afraid that if I talk to Amy or Eric or Katie, like they're going to look poorly on me. But this is somebody who's neutral with lots of experience. That QR code leads you to a Google form, and I'm actually going to put it in the chat as well while I'm talking, so that you can, even if it's just somebody like a thought partner, a conversation with somebody to say like, hey, I'm thinking about applying in this way, and what do you think? Those folks are available to help. And so the Google form just kind of alerts us to the fact that you would like some requests, some understanding of where you're applying, and then that's going to allow us to connect you directly to, and then it'll be out of our hands, right? Like you'll just be dealing directly with them. So that's the QR code. And Katie, maybe you can throw the link in there while I'm talking, because I'm not getting it sort of immediately, didn't have it ready to go. So, and you'll see that link in the chat eventually. So, okay, questions? All right, so you'll notice on our agenda that we have some additional items for discussion and conversation. And one of those, I just want to talk briefly about AI. I don't know about you, but I feel like I have a lot of conversations about AI lately, everywhere I go. 3 years ago, which was the last time we had an application process, AI did not exist as a tool that people used at all, right? Now it does. And so and I think this is going to be kind of an interesting ongoing conversation that we all sort of have, like culturally and collectively, and then also in the nonprofit community. And Katie mentioned that at that shared or that mini conference in January, we're gonna have a panel on AI. But I'll maybe give you some of my like commentary and observations and sort of feelings about AI generally. First, we know people are using AI to write grant applications. I think that's kind of, you may not be, but there are lots of people that are using AI here locally and also like across the nation to write grant applications. And if this is a tool that helps you write a better grant application, like maybe like you're not great at grammar or spelling or whatever, like I think that's fantastic. We need to learn to use that tool really well. Part of the reason that we shaped the questions in the way that we did, where we have examples, is it's very unlikely that AI will be able to write that well for you, right? Like unless you're really constantly uploading things into whatever AI tool you use and it knows you really, really well, there are going to be some places that AI cannot serve you. I also think it means that the site visit becomes really important, right? I don't know how we'll get to as a community, but if at some point we know that everyone is using AI to fully write their grant application, it means that becomes less important. And the site visit where we're in person becomes really important. And if you've ever heard me say, I've said this like a million times, I've been saying it for 10 years. It's really hard to have insight unless you're on site. That's why we do a site visit. It's so much different to read something on paper than to be able to look into the eyes of somebody who is leading a program, running a program, to be able to ask them questions. We find that the site visit, as hard as it is to coordinate that, really is a great tool for us to really kind of really understand, because a lot of our volunteers do not work in the nonprofit sector. My God, my face is like in the sun. And so being on site can be really powerful for them. I've had many situations where we have a volunteer who's an allocations volunteer. They go to one of your sites, fall in love with what you do, are so impressed, and they end up on the board, of your organization or as a volunteer for a fundraiser. And so it's not just a way for us to evaluate programs, it's also hopefully something that could eventually become a benefit for you, because you've got now 6 or 7 people who might be exposed to what you do and had no idea before, or they follow you now on social media, or they donate to your agency outside of United Way donations. And so sometimes that site visit can be a little bit stressful, but if you can think of it in a more positive way, it really can be like a tool that really helps people understand the impact of what you do and how important it is in the community. And so I think AI is a great tool, but I will also say, if you've never used AI before, probably your United Way grant application is not the time to start, because really effective use of AI means you're kind of training it and it knows your voice, and it sort of really, you've fed a lot of information about your agency like into the program. And if you've never used it and you think it might help you, you might spend more time training it than actually like writing the application. If it's a tool you've used and you find it really helpful, then I think that's great. Utilize it in such a way that you have a better grant application. But then, know as well, like there's some things that it might not be able to do for you. So I would love, if anybody wants to share, to hear your thoughts about AI, because I find this to be a fascinating topic of conversation. I have my own like weird mixed relationship with AI. Nick Dean and I, who does our social media, we have like nonstop like philosophical conversations about it. So if anybody wants to weigh in, I'd be really curious. Misty, you raised your hand.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So with Scouts, we have merit badges and things like that. So we've seen a lot of AI popping up, and you can tell, you start getting a feel for the robotic language of AI, and they don't realize that, you have to customize it. So that would be a word of caution if you are not really, like you said, feeding AI and customizing it too much. It can come across, have somebody else read
Yeah,
that's a human. What you're before you put it out.
good idea.
Can I say something?
Yes,
So,
please, Stephanie.
My background, I went to school for technology. I worked in a tech company for a few years remotely out of Boston. As a tech lover, I wouldn't say I'm any sort of expert because, I went to school 15 years ago for tech. So big freaking deal, right? It's useless right now. However, I do follow everything that's new and coming out, and as running a extremely small nonprofit organization and knowing the YWCA, we've got 19 through New York State, and some of the biggest YWs have all these departments and have people helping them. They have hired grant writers that are full-time. They have a department that just for HR. They have departments for everything. I am the department, where I am. So tools, technology has to be huge for me. So AI has to be a big part of my life because I can't hire a grant writer. So I can use the AI, but I've been using different forms of AI for 5 years, at least 5 or 6 years, plugging stuff into a document. It rewrites it, rewords it. I go through, and like you said, Misty, that, of course I can't, they're like, and using these crazy words. And so, yeah, I go through, but instead of spending $2,000 on a grant writer, I'm buying a program for $50 and it will look up the information that I need. And then, I can go in, proofread it, and then send it back out. But for an organization like mine that is so small, it is vital to time management and saving money. So for bottom line, that's what it is. If I didn't have it, it would take me, I don't have to tell you guys how long it takes to write a grant and to look up all of the information, all the demographics and everything else when you have a tool that's so easy to use. But like Amy said, you can't just use it one day and then not use it ever again. It's something that you have to watch YouTube videos about, you have to Google it, and you have to really understand it and use it as a tool and not just something where you just, oh, this is easy. You can't do it like that. But I think with our small organizations that it's almost foolish not to take advantage of even just like the apps like Slack and Salesforce and things like that we have. But again, to back Amy up on what she's saying, like you can't just use it one day. You've really got to dive deep into it. I mean, I even have AI going to meetings for me, Otter AI, and it gives me a whole script. So, a meeting like this, if I miss something, I can go back and read the whole script and see who said what, and then be able to even write minutes and, all that stuff. So I think it's a great tool, a great resource for organizations that are tiny and can't afford grant writers and all that. So sorry, long-winded, but I love technology. So that's my thing.
Thank you, Stephanie. Melanie, you wanted to add something.
Well, for Stephanie, can you share what AI system you're using? I don't know.
Yeah, I use Otter AI.
Okay.
So that's great. I can send that out too. And I also use Grammarly that I plug everything into. I can write a whole thing and then, they help me write as I go. And then I use ChatGPT, and then it's another my company that I used to work for is called Anthony AI, and I use that for free too. But if anybody does want any help on any of that, I can just give you my suggestions and what YouTube videos to kind of educate yourself on to watch about it too.
Stephanie, if you drop your contact information into the chat, that will give people your contact information if they are interested in following up.
Absolutely. And sorry, I am home today because I can't even see across the street right now in Fredonia. So
Yeah, and I've never honestly have used it, but I know my husband, he's a part of a class, and what I guess my concern is being able to personally share stories that are impactful. And like Misty said, it's very robotic. But I am interested in how it could increase potential of other funding that, the federal funds that are out there that could be potential for our area. So I am interested in looking into it. But I guess my concern is for our youth and the workforce that's coming up and their ability to communicate effectively once they get to our agencies. That's the one concern I have, and being able to, because obviously we've got an education, we've done what we've done, but how is it going to impact our youth that we're going to be hiring down the road? So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, like there is a lot of conversations around not just like nonprofit grant applications, but like what is the impact, to our society. And
I have actually an opinion on that as well. I really think that our youth has to also grab that and work with it and be transparent about the fact that they're using it, because it's going to increase um, our activity with our staff. So if you say, put this newsletter out, use Chat GPT, plug it in there, revise it, send it to me, and let's see. And as long as it's clear and you're not trying to be like, I wrote this myself, I'm so smart. Like, it has to be our youth. Like my son, he's in college right now, and his professors will say, I know you're going to use this thing, so use it. But then, like Amy said, I'm going to ask you to tell me about it too. So it's not something that we should be hiding and ashamed of. And it's not because somebody can't use their grammar themselves and all of that stuff. It's a tool that we have to say, yes, I plugged this into here. I rewrote it in my own, took some things out, added this about our company, look it over, but it's going to be more efficient. So our youth is going to be able to not struggle with writing papers as long as their teachers know, okay, I did this, but now this is the part where we're going to come in and, like Amy said, do a site visit type of thing. And you've got to be able to talk about this stuff. So I think it'll be faster and more efficient for everybody down the road.
well,
And
this
I'm
is
not
very
even selling anything.
I hope you all decide to come to the mini conference through the Capacity Lab, because we will have it's not the only thing that's on the topic on the agenda, but for the sake of time, we do have to move on. And I want to turn it over to Lisa, and she's going to talk a little bit about CIFA and share her screen. I'm also putting into the chat the website for CIFA New York. And I kind of explained why it might be important already at the top of our agenda. And Lisa's going to give you some more logistics about how you actually do this. Although I don't know if CIFA is quite ready for people to like create new accounts yet. They're sort of in the process of updating their system. Big shocker. So
Yep.
Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. So CIFA, State Employee Federated Appeal, is basically their United Way campaign for payroll deduction for all of the state employees. I know I heard Amy talk about it earlier, so I won't dwell on what it is. This is the website. So CIFANYS.org. For those of you on the call that are already agencies, applications are not going to be relevant. We do have a few that are going to be due for recertification this year. And that's a whole nother topic I'll cover. So if you're completely new to the CIFA process, the CIFA website has all of these sections. This is also where the employees go to pledge for their campaign. So they've brought everything into one website for us to use. Essentially, charities and federations is what we're interested in for this process. There's a charity list. I think this clicks to the book. The council publishes a book that's, I don't know, 100 pages or so, lists all the charities alphabetically and then by region for the state.
And if you don't know if your charity's in there, you can go to this website and you can click on the charity list and you can see, because maybe somebody did list you at some point. So that's probably like the place you want to start is, am I listed in the book?
Right.
So.
Already listed. But let's see. So new agency applications is where you're going to go. And then you're going to get the lovely message that the period opens December 15th. So the one thing that I have to say about the CIFA campaign is that everything has to flow to the New York State law. So this isn't something United Way's created. This is actually written into state law, how these things have to go. So you're going to see a link to the New York State regulations. They've recently gone through an update and made some significant changes to this process for those laws. I think it was a year and a half ago almost. So there's links to that. So you can see what your state law obligations are to be a charity. If you like some light reading, need to put yourself to sleep, highly recommend. There is a new agency checklist on here as well. So this is just everything you're going to need before you go into the process. I believe last year we were able to save, or weren't able, because you create a login and you're able to save the process and go back to it, but they're tweaking it. So I can't speak to what it's going to look like this year. So this is everything you're going to need going in. A lot of these are any grant application. The one thing that I want to point out that's different because it's New York State is the vendor rep certification. That is through the New York State Comptroller's Office. If your agency receives any state funding, you probably have this already. When you go to apply, your PDF of your vend rep certification has to be within 6 months of that date. So if you had it for 3 years, you're going to have to log in to the account and renew it. I did pull that up. So this is the state comptroller's website that links to. It talks about enrolling in the vend rep system, what you're going to need. When you click on go to our portal, it should be a login. If you need an account, there's a link. If you forgot your user ID, password, all those fun things. Obviously, we have an account. And then you're going to go to your dashboard and it's going to give you your information, your users, your profile, and then the vend rep portal. And all you're going to do essentially is work through this vendor responsibility NFP. As you can see here, the last time I went through this was April of this year. So obviously, if we were having to recertify or reply, we would need to go through this start a new process. So you're going to click through that and go through that process. And then at the end, you'll get a little PDF form with a certificate number on it. And that's what you're going to need to upload to the CIFA application.
And I just dropped into the chat the website to the vend rep website, so you have access to it in case you didn't have an account already.
The other thing listed and linked to on that original CIFA page was the anti-terrorism compliance. This needs to be physically signed and uploaded as a PDF. Let's see, they call this the CIFA procedure. I'm assuming that this will be updated a little more with the application. Once the application is live, they have this pretty much for the recertification because that happened last. So the way the regulations were updated is once an agency is in the system, we have to recertify every 3 years on a rotating cycle, and they tell us when that is. So if you register and you're a completely new agency in 2025, they could set your recertification date to I don't know. It's what, 2028, I believe. They will automatically send you information on that. Or the United Way will receive a list of who's due for recertification and when. And if we'll all be in contact. You will hear so much from us that it's ridiculous, but it's also important to keep your contact information updated with us for that process. We have some non-partner agencies that tend to fall off because they never got the contact information. But yes, this is the lovely state law that goes into all the details about what CIFA is and its purpose and how it's governed. The state council is made up of state employees and they run this campaign. The United Way, we simply act as a campaign manager for them. I have a local committee of state employees that run the campaign officially. They will be sent applications and recertifications and we'll have to approve it locally, and then it goes to the council for approval. And then in August, they get put in a book and we get all the materials and we go out to the agencies like SUNY Fredonia, the DOT, Department of Labor, DEC, and the prison system, and run the campaign with them. But
So Lisa, if you could drop your email address in the chat, Lisa will not do this for you. And if you need help or, you know, something isn't making sense, she will be able to perhaps like give you some advice or point you in the right direction, keeping in mind that you can't, like, until December 15th, when they actually open up for new applications, you can't do this updating work yet. So and it's possible they might be delayed. That does happen where they say it's going to be up by December 15th and then guess what? It's not. So expect that from anything that comes from New York State. They have a timeline and then they have what they actually end up doing. Anything else, Lisa, for us, or any questions that you might have of Lisa about CIFA or me? Okay. All right, final thing, Katie, we're going to turn it over to you and just some sort of save the date, exciting things that we're doing out of our Dunkirk office.
Yeah, hey everyone again. I will be very quick. I know we're at the end of our time, but I want to share with you another kind of exciting development that we have at United Way. As many of you are aware, we have offices both here in Jamestown, where I'm located today, as well as in Dunkirk. Our Dunkirk office is larger than the space that we need as a team right now. And so over the last few months, we've spent quite a bit of time kind of dreaming of a value-centered mission for that additional space. And so with the help of some really great partners, we have dedicated that space to co-working for nonprofits in our community, specifically, and I think most importantly for us, for our agency partners. So this space is going to be opened in January, and here's what it entails essentially. So officially, there will be 2 cubicles that are dedicated to permanent leases for nonprofit agencies who need a permanent setup spot in Dunkirk. So there are 2 cubicles equipped with file storage and a desk and chairs and access to a printer that nonprofit agencies will be able to access on a lease basis. And then there is another cubicle in the space that we are calling our flex space that is going to be available for anybody who needs it on a first come, first served basis that can be accessed using an online scheduling tool. That will be shared with all of you as soon as we are ready to share it, which will be about the first week of January. We intend to open that space to the public beginning mid-January. We'll also be having a ribbon cutting to kind of celebrate this hub for collaboration out of our office in Northern Chautauqua. So we're really excited for this. You'll receive all the news in detail later, but we wanted to make sure that you were the first people that knew about this kind of exciting development for us in the city of Dunkirk, a new co-working hub for nonprofits. Amy, is there anything that you would want to add to that?
Well, I'd maybe give an example. So like you might be, you know, an agency that is primarily located in Jamestown, but you serve, right, all of Chautauqua County. and you have a staff person who's serving Northern Chautauqua County, and you're like, you know what, it might be nice for them to just like have a place to land for a few hours in between. They'd be able to use the scheduling tool and use this flex office space. It's not meant to be a permanent thing. It's just sort of like an as needed, we need a spot for like a staff person to land for the day or a couple of hours, that sort of thing. We also have our boardroom, which has technology to host like a Zoom meeting. You might need a space in Northern Chautauqua County to do that, to host some kind of meeting that's a little bit larger where you need a boardroom table. You could also access the boardroom through the scheduling tool as well. And again, it's first come, first serve. If it's already occupied or being used, then you'll have to figure out another plan. But so we're excited to be able to offer that to you know, primarily our United Way funded community partners, but really I think any nonprofit that might need some flex space and helps them be more efficient in the northern part of Chautauqua County. So JCLC, if you're familiar, they already lease space at United Way. You might have seen that on our sign in our Dunkirk office. And we're not ready to announce. We do have 2 agencies who have taken the lease space, the permanent lease space as well. But we will announce that when we kind of announce like publicly and have our ribbon cutting. So we're really excited about it. And if you've ever visited our Dunkirk office, please come again because it looks really different than it used to look. So, okay. We're at 10:59 and right at the end of our time. I appreciate so much the work that you all do in this community. I'm excited for this next allocations process to even learn more deeply what it is that you're doing. And please do not forget to reach out if you need help, assistance, support of any kind. This recording of this Zoom meeting will be available on our website as soon as we have access to it. So thank you very much.
Hey, Amy, sorry.
Wonderful day. Yes, go ahead, Eric.
There's a question in the chat from Melanie from Prevention Works.
Oh, I think she answered it. I'm good.
Did she? Okay, just making
Yeah.
sure we got it covered.
Thank you for catching that, Eric. Okay. Thank you, everybody.